Hey everybody, welcome to another amazing interview at Film.Music.Media. My name is Kaya Savas, and I'm in conversation with the one and only David Fleming. Dave, how are you doing today? Thanks for joining me.
I'm good, Kaya. How are you?
Good, good. It's good to see you. It's been a while since we've chatted, and I know we've
Yeah, I
kept in
was
touch, but
when did we leave off? We the Blue Planet, I think,
Blue Planet.
a few years ago. But
Yeah,
yeah. You've been busy since then.
I've been busy. You've been busy, so I think it's a good time to catch up. I mean, you've had a one hell of a year, I think, and yeah. So, but since we've never kind of done like a solo interview before, I've been asking. I want to start off with this question to kind of kick off our conversation. I love the answers I've been getting. It's different from every person. And it's a simple question, maybe with a bigger answer, but I'm curious for you as a human being, as an artist, as a storyteller, as a musician, as a composer, what does music mean to you?
Oh my God. Well, let me put it this way as um I feel like for a lot of people who do what I do, or a lot of film composers, um this job is a way for them to express themselves musically.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit opposite for me in that I think music is my way into storytelling. I think
Mm.
it's something ever since I was a kid, I really connected with how music meets story. I probably my earliest musical sort of the thing that really sucked me in was my one of my neighbors had a cassette tape of the Phantom of the Opera, and I would just like wear that out when I was like 4 years old. Um, and music by itself obviously means so much, and it's a way to, I think, sort of bypass a lot of everyday stuff and just go internal very quickly.
Yeah.
But I think for me specifically, it's always been sort of a connection to storytelling. Even in high school playing in bands, we'd be playing like punk shows and we'd be doing like weird concept album, sort of convoluted stories about cities I'd never been to, and and I think you know working in high school, I would work at a video store, and I was just super immersed in story all the time. My mother's a literature teacher, and I had sort of simultaneous aspirations to be a writer as while I was working on music. So I think if I have to answer that question with one sentence or one paragraph rather than, spend the whole day talking to you about it, it would be
Right.
that. It would be it's really like the gateway into storytelling for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and I think it's a really powerful tool because it you can do things subconsciously that you can't do um just writing or even just capturing images. There's something subconscious eh, that happens with music, and it really does sort of bypass all this sort of surface level stuff and get to the internal really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was similar because I kind of went on the filmmaking route because I went to film school. I'm not a musician, I'm not a composer, but same thing when I was 9 years old, had a cassette of a mutual friend of ours, Mr. Hans Zimmer, Nick Lenny Smith, Harry Gregson Williams. The Rock was the cassette, and
Oh, The
I
Rock,
mean,
yeah,
I
yeah,
just play that thing. For a 9 year old boy, that was like the fucking most awesome fucking score you could have. So it's
yeah,
just like,
yeah.
and
Yeah, Lion King for me, I think was also a big
yeah,
deal,
Lion
you
King.
know.
I think I was yeah, Lion King came out when I was a little bit younger, but it was like, and I was aware of Jurassic Park too. Jurassic Park was big too. For I had the cassette John Williams, so it was just like those kind of
Yeah,
cassettes,
yeah.
just on my Sony Walkman, back seat, looking out the window. you know.
That's the best. That's the best. That's I really miss being a passenger,
Yeah,
and zoning out. And I feel like that's how I absorbed so much music as a kid. And um, before the pandemic, my studio's in Santa Monica, but we live on the train line, and I
mm,
was loving taking the train again because it was like, oh, I can be a passenger, and LA
yeah,
is such a car city, so I got to get back into that because it was all of a sudden I was listening to music in a different way again,
And yeah, and and that's for storytelling, it transports you into the world. And I always fell in love with music that was able to not only, really live with the movie, but live separately from the film. And you could just start, your brain would start going crazy with whether you're just
yeah.
processing emotions or you're just picturing scenes and you're following the pacing. And so that was, yeah, that was definitely a window in it for me. So I'm curious. I mean, clearly you were loving, you mentioned your mother and that you were loving storytelling and you almost were a writer. When did like I guess
I
music
was
go
not
for,
almost a writer,
well,
by
we
the
were
way.
thinking about.
I don't want to get that out. But yeah, they were I was interested in both at the same time. And they sort of were always meshed.
So when did
But
they, yeah, when did you pivot and go like, okay, music is what I love. I'm going to pursue this, and from hobby as a kid or a teen to career. When was that also point where it's like, oh, it's not that just part of my life as, as adolescent growing up. Now I'm going to pursue this as my career.
I don't know how most people feel, but I feel like I feel like it's a really hard thing to sort of plan on, or at least my family were not musicians. I think it might be different if your parents are musicians
Yeah.
or professional
Yeah.
musicians, especially. So I don't know that I really truly thought it was like a possibility of having a career. I think it
Mm.
just sort of kind of happened in that I went to school for music, um, and uh, I was sort of on my summers. I was kind of like balancing two internships, entry level jobs, which is one was I was working at a studio,
Mm.
like an ad house, and I was making ringtones, like the kind that don't exist anymore. Like
When you used to
little
pay 99
skits.
cents for a ringtone.
Yeah. So I was doing that, and working on small ad spots. And at the same time, I was working like a fire sprinkler job. I was sort of getting my start designing fire sprinkler systems, which was sort of like the safety job, I guess. Which was like, okay, music
Wow.
school is fun, but maybe there should be a plan B. But I was terrible at it. I was really really bad, and
Yeah.
thank God, like I didn't go into that. Who knows how many lives would have been lost if I was responsible for that.
All the
But I
faulty
knew
fire
I
systems.
actually, yeah, but I actually knew it was a problem one week because obviously music was my passion. I was playing in bands and I was and studying film scoring, at least by myself.
Yeah.
I knew it was a problem when I was home, for the weekend and recording one of my friends, and all of a sudden I was using my AutoCAD quick keys in Pro Tools, like my
Hmm.
for the fire sprinkler stuff, and I was just like, okay, this is a huge problem. So the way it actually became a career past that was um I saw a flyer on a door for a BMI competition, the Pete Carpenter Fellowship,
Mm.
which at the time was, whoever won got to go work with Mike Post for 6 weeks. I think Chris Leonard's is doing it now, but at the time it was Mike. And I sent in a piece, and I won this thing. And at the time there was the writer's strike, so it kind of got delayed. Um, but then I went out, I did this thing with Mike, and he was just like, you know what, you need to move out here. You need just be ready to not work in film music for a year and a half. Um, and so I saved up some money through the summer and moved out. And at the time, uh, Atli Örvarsson, who was who had won that fellowship about a decade before I did,
Yeah.
he needed some assistance, and it just kind of worked out. The strange thing about it is that I have a very vivid memory of being at that fire sprinkler company, and it was like one of the times where I was supposed to be doing something, and I was, because that wasn't what I was meant to do. I was, doing something else. I was Googling stuff about film music, and it's where I first heard about Hans's company, which I think was still Media Ventures at the time, or maybe I don't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what. but I found out about it when I was at that job, and I was like, I would love to end up there someday. Like, I just loved hearing about the sort of, the campus vibe of it. And and strangely enough, Atli happened to have a studio there at the time. So, within a month of moving to LA, I was at remote control, which is kind of where I was hoping I could end up. And
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 now you're
then
there.
since then, there's been a lot of sleepless nights and grinds, but yeah, I'm still making it work.
Yeah, I love, and I just love, I'm friends with a lot of people who work there, and seeing you, and because I remember visiting Dom late nights in that room that you're in now. That's your studio now.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I don't have the Union Jack anywhere. I think that's the major difference in our decorating.
Yeah, a little
Uh,
bit, and a little bit more, yeah, a more neat and clean. Oh no, his new studio is pretty cool. I don't know if you've checked it out. You should go hang out at his new
oh,
studio.
you love it. I haven't been, but I've seen him recently, and yeah, yeah, I gotta go visit him at some point.
Yeah, but yeah. So talk to me about those like early days of being. I know you work with Atli. I mean, you've worked with Lauren and Steve Jablonsky, and of course Hans. And as you're coming up as a composer, a lot of people are probably curious what that additional composer position is. Working as an assistant, becoming an additional composer, working on a music team, and having that kind of campus vibe, as you mentioned at remote control. What was it like as being a young composer, and kind of what were, I guess, the major lessons you were learning through those positions?
Yeah, I mean, the only way to talk about the whole thing is to kind of picture it as a montage, because if you
Yeah,
didn't, talk about the real step by step, it's so tedious and boring
yeah,
but literally it's just the the easiest way to explain it is hopefully one opportunity leads to another. And
right.
with Otley, I was starting as a tech assistant, and I had never operated more than like a laptop with Reason at that point. So it was a huge that was of course like a huge deep end to be thrown in. And then from there, it's just kind of trying to execute on everything that you're being asked to. So if you get an opportunity to produce, do some drum programming, that was probably the first kinds of things that I was doing. You know, knock that out of the park, hopefully, and then, you know, hey, do you want to help arrange this cue? Okay,
Mm,
that goes well. Okay, do you wanna take a stab at writing this cue? And then, at the same time, those other guys that you mentioned, Steve Jablonsky and Lorne, they were in the hall, and I think they were seeing that maybe it was going okay and going well. And so just one opportunity led to another over a long period of time. And I think we talked about it on the last time, but the nice thing about writing with a lot of those different guys was you sort of start to see different things that you like about each one's process, and try
right.
to grab little tips. I mean, for sure, I don't want to gloss over Otley, because he really was my mentor.
Yeah, I mean,
When
you
he
spent a
came,
lot of time with him and worked on a lot of stuff. Yeah,
and a really long time there. So we're fast forwarding through a lot,
yeah,
which we should. But no, I mean, everything has been, one opportunity. Hopefully you do a good job, and hopefully somebody, you know, says, "Hey, have you thought about giving Dave a try?" And so that's kind of, I feel very fortunate to have learned with a lot of these guys, with Steve and Lauren and Otley, and uh early on, because especially as their careers were sort of getting going,
yeah,
you you really can glean a lot if you're paying attention, and you're not just sort of focused on what you want to do, but you're really trying to pay attention to how they handle meetings, and how they handle a project beginning to end, bad and good. It's I know the assistant route is not super glamorous, and I understand why people would want to bypass it, but for me personally, I found it to be um, really essential to to learning, how to do this, and hopefully to how to continue doing it for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it varies person to person. I just had an amazing interview with a great composer, Emily Sankofa, and she was talking about the same thing where she knows a lot of people who do the assistant route and additional composer route, but she felt it was not it was not a right fit for her, but she was never knocking down that path as well. And you learn, and I think it's because what you learn in school is just not doesn't really prepare you for, like, I guess, the professional world, at least for what I've been hearing from other composers, and at least from film school for me. But to be thrust into that position and you're working on these, big tier, AAA titles, like, and then you get to see with these massive budgets and massive meetings, all these producers and cooks in the kitchen, and you get to navigate that. So I mean, you probably learned the business more so in those formative years, like more than anywhere you could possibly have ended up.
Oh, for sure. Like,
Yeah.
I went to a little state school, and you know a great experience, but really
Yeah.
behind the times in terms of the practicalities of the modern film scoring industry. So yeah, I feel it was really helpful, and also I should say that it depends who you assist for. If you have
Yeah.
somebody who's generous with their knowledge, and also you know in terms of the meetings, having you involved with the meetings, and at least to sort of observe. I think it's yeah, early on, and I think this is true of a lot of people who come out of the school, and they're or in their early 20s, and they're just like ready to go. When I look back now, I'm like, yeah, you thought you were ready to go, you weren't quite ready to go,
Yeah.
so I'm really thankful to have had that experience with all these like really really talented guys early on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned about how, you kind of you get to learn and watch them work and pick and choose parts of their process to then, and of course, develop your own. You want to be, no one wants to just be a copycat and follow in the footsteps of someone
Yeah.
in front of you. You're developing your own sound. You're coming into your own as a composer. So I'd love to talk maybe just kind of a general approach about your process too before we jump into some projects. And I know this question will vary depending on a lot of things, whether what the type of project is, show, TV, film, game, whatever, docu-series. But I'm curious for you, where does the first note come from for you? Like when you're in your like element and you're starting on a project, if you're lucky enough to, be early on, do you love reading the script? Do you love having conversation with the filmmakers, the producers, the director? Do you love waiting for that first locked cut so you can watch it and then just start forming opinion? You do not want to, you want to see the images first. I'm curious where you go to kind of, start getting that first idea, that first little something to start the whole process.
I mean, God, I would love to be involved in the script phase. That I'm on like a run of getting involved very late in the project
Which is usually
on
what
a lot of
happens.
these
Yeah.
things. Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of, you know, uh, go 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 as soon as you're kind of paying attention. But I will say that um very often after my first conversation with the director, or the producer, or whoever is, you know, giving me the rundown at first, I'll sit down at a piano, and there something will come out very quickly that, maybe it doesn't end up being the main theme, but it will
Hmm.
end up informing a lot of what I want to do. Um, and then the other thing I spend a lot of time thinking about, and one reason I love working with Hans, because he's similarly minded, which uh, I love thinking about the sort of sonic identity of what the story is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love writing for orchestra, and more as I get older, especially. But it's I love that it's a great sort of centerpiece of a wide palette of colors.
Yeah.
I'm not a traditionalist in terms of like everything needs to be a symphony. And I think one of the most fun things is to try to figure out the sonic identity of a score, and try to really zone in on that. So I would say the two things are kind of happening simultaneously, and just playing the simplest version of something on a piano, um, provided that what they want is a thematic score, and then the second part would be like really trying to figure out the sonic identity, and the other thing that we talk about like what we grab from each composer. The other
Yeah.
thing that I've really sort of latched onto from Hans is that he'll be casting players that he loves.
Yep.
It's not just about, oh, like what synth sound. It's like, who could do this,
Yeah.
and um and one of the nice things about having a lot of time, working with other people and sort of leading up to getting my own projects is I now know a lot of the players in Los Angeles and London, and or at least the ones that we've worked with quite often. So it's nice to have somebody else's sound in mind, and to not just get an abstract idea, but literally be thinking about the attitude of the story, and yeah, who could support that.
Yeah, I know Hans really just like he casts his scores, like a director casting a film, and
Yeah.
he asked me to write the liner notes for Hans Zimmer Live, and getting to interview all the 19 band members and to see what unique things they bring to the table, for just something like that. But I know he does that with his scores too, and of course he uses a lot of those amazing musicians in his scores, and I know you're mutual friends with him, with all those people as well, but uh
Yeah. I was just going to tell one story about
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
in the pandemic. At the very start of the pandemic, we had just started working on Hillbilly Elegy for Ron,
Yeah.
and it was kind of like, I think for everybody there was just a week of just watching movies and pretending that the world didn't exist. But
Yeah.
then we were like, okay, this seems like we're going to settle into this rhythm. We got to figure this out. And we had plans to record in Nashville and make it like a more of an orchestral score. Um, and when that clearly wasn't going to work, we started talking about musicians, and I remember he called me. He called me on maybe that second week, and we had started talking about guitarists, and this was sort of the first time where I really kind of took note of of that mindset,
Yeah.
where my quick thing was to think about the practicalities and like who's available, who could do this, like who do we know, easy stuff. And Hans was like, "What about Derek Trucks?" And Derek Trucks is probably like the best slide guitarist in the world, and I was a huge fan of his, and often we'd watch this video of him with BB King and John Mayer, and he's just incredible. And it was like really like a light bulb moment for me, because of course, cut to it happened to work out perfectly because his tour got shut down,
Yeah.
and he was like, "That sounds great. Let's do this." Um, but it was really like a light bulb moment in terms of, just go for who will make the best sound, who can really bring something out of this, and maybe someone unconventional too. That's the other
Yeah.
element of it. Like, think outside the film music box, because I think it can get really easy to sort of um to play it safe in that way. So that was a big moment of seeing that, and also seeing that seeing that score through to fruition. Um, his guitar ended up being this color that was it didn't work everywhere because it was so individualistic, but the places that it worked, like, people would really take notice and be like, "What is that? Who is that?" And
Yeah.
so that's one of those experiences that I was just like, okay, this is something that you gotta follow and remember, when it's your time to be in charge of making those calls.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I
Also, it
mean,
helps that it's Hans Zimmer. It helps that it's Hans Zimmer call
yeah.
too. So I should
You're
I
like
should say
glazing over the
that.
fact that it's Hans. So
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but talk to me about, because you worked on a lot of his scores as an additional composer and arranger, and I mean you were part of the Dune team and did amazing work on Wonder Woman and of course recently with Top Gun. But you also, I mean, you mentioned Hillbilly Elegy where you co-scored with Hans, or you recently also worked with the Sun as an additional composer, but the Unforgivable you co-scored, and then of course your new score that just came out, The Night Logan Woke Up, which is fantastic. It's such a
Oh, thanks,
wonderful
man.
Pete. Like I love. I mean, I haven't seen the series yet, but because it's a French series, but
But you can't see it. Yeah.
I
It's
know.
only
So,
it's only in
but
France and Canada.
it's only France and Canada, but hopefully it'll be available internationally streaming somewhere
Yeah, I hope
soon.
so.
But for people who are listening right now, definitely go get the OST. You can stream it on streaming platforms, and but yeah. So talk to me about working with Hans. I mean, you've been additional composer on his team. You've co-scored with him as a creative partner. What is it like working with him, and how do you, I guess, complement each other on the scores that you've worked co-scored together?
Wow. Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, it's funny because last time we talked was kind of our first time collaborating on Blue Planet,
Yeah, Blue Planet. Yeah,
and there's, I mean, we like I'd helped him out with like a short here and there, and he Hans obviously is a big hero of mine. I don't blow smoke. I try not to blow smoke with him often, but
me too.
um,
I know because he gets
uh,
uncomfortable.
yeah, yeah, it's no fun for anybody. But obviously he was a big hero of mine, and was I was working with a lot of guys who had worked with him, and I was kind of getting a lot of secondhand knowledge in a way
Yeah,
of from their experiences, and I think because when you work with him, he can't help shape, or you can't help be shaped um, by his process and the way he thinks about storytelling. Um, what I love about Hans is sort of goes back to your first question for me, which is that he, of course, music means so much to him, but I honestly think he's one of the most um, talented storytellers
yeah, for sure.
in this business, and you can see it when you're in meetings with him and directors, whether it be Ron or Denis. Like, people really value that he comes at it from a story perspective and is not just like, let me shoehorn my musical ideas all into this. Um so yeah, I mean, I had sort of worked with a lot of people who worked with him, but never with him for a while, and even left remote, and had a studio just down the street.
Mhm.
But of course, as soon as I moved, that's when Hans started calling and, "Ah, why don't you come back? Why don't you come back?" But I mean, Hans is like, um, I'm trying to figure out how to say something that everyone else hasn't said about him, but he is just really the pushing to do something um distinctive
Yeah,
is
yeah,
something that is consistent, and you know when you're fired up is really inspiring, and when you're tired can be very frustrating, and I would tell him the same thing. But once you get through the process, you're always grateful for him sort of pushing on and in a weird way on the filmmaker side of things. It's almost like having another producer for the film involved, and it's like, how can we make this the best? Even if it's his idea, he's pushing for it to be better.
yeah,
So that's a really inspiring energy to be around, um and yeah, and when we've gotten to sort of collaborate as co-composers, it's the same in a way, but it's I feel like maybe through some of those earlier films, it was, I don't know. I can't speak for him. I don't know why
yeah.
why it worked, or why I compliment him. So I'm not going to try. I'm not going to try. All I can say is that I think, I I'm not on staff at remote. I come back on an invitation basis, and
Hmm.
I think as long as he's enjoying what I'm doing and I'm enjoying being on the projects, it's really been a pleasure thus
Yeah.
far. And I, again, not to blow smoke, but like really like um you know an important milestone for me to be able to collaborate with him because his music has meant so much to me, and his storytelling. So um I don't know what your original question was, but
It was just
if
working with
it's
Hans. I mean, you've
Hans,
described,
it's
I know you described all the scores you've worked together. So I mean, I mentioned Hillbilly Elegy and the Unforgivable, but I want to jump into the Night Logan Woke Up, which is a fantastic miniseries that we mentioned that's only available in France and Canada, from director Xavier Dolan. So I'm curious, talk to me about working with Xavier. What were the first conversations about the music, and how did you guys approach it? What were the kind of like, what kind of score did he want? What kind of score did you thought was right? And what did you guys end up doing for the series?
yeah, that was interesting because we were, we got
First
brought
of all, how
on.
did that happen? How'd you guys end up on a French miniseries?
That's a great question. Uh, uh, well, first of all, I mean, it was very late in the game. We got brought
Yeah,
on late in the game, and um, I honestly don't know what happened, but I know there was a composer attached,
sure. Yeah.
and and for whatever reason, it didn't work out, and uh, Xavier was left sort of um, needing a score and had a deadline coming up, and he's from Montreal and is friends with Denis, and I think he reached out to Denis and I don't want to say a panic, but I'm sure there was like a nervous call of like what do I do? And
Yeah.
I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure Denis was the one who suggested to call Hans, and and that prompted Hans to call me, and with Xavier on FaceTime at the same time, sort of putting you on the spot, like, hey, do you want to do this? And the thing about Xavier is that, like, I mean, he's so young, and he's already done a ton of films, and
Yeah.
he's, you know, sort of similar, to what I said about trying to glean something from Hans's mindset to just call Derek or whoever's right for the part.
Yeah.
Xavier, early on, he he worked with Gabriel Yared for on a number of those films when he was still sort of a young up and coming filmmaker, and he really he really values art and quality in a way sort of above and beyond um any practical concerns. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think, like, for him, for instance, he shoots on film. This is a relatively small French Canadian production, and there were two things that were incredibly important to him, which is that he shoots on film, and that we record with a live orchestra, which we did at Air. And
Wow.
I think those are costly decisions.
Yeah.
But that's the type of filmmaker he is. He really is, like, he wants it to be, again, he wants it to be something of distinction and quality, and um so but there was no time, so we had to do 5-hour long episodes um in a little over a month
Wow.
to score at Air, and so it was a lot, but one thing that helped was that Xavier, he's, first of all, he really loves music. He's a huge music lover, and loves film music, instrumental music, and he had temped his own show, and the temp was all really kind of intimidatingly good pieces of music.
Yeah.
So that, in some ways it helped because it was like really inspiring, and I was particularly gung ho of like, this is going to be great. Like, yes, this is kind of a scary ask for the amount of time we have, but this is going to be great. And then the other thing that helped was that he wanted to be in the room with me writing as much as possible, um when we were working on it. So like, he was back there lying on the couch for at least half of the writing process, which is something that I've never done with a director. Like I know, Lorne sometimes will have the directors in there, and it I think it can really help sort of speed up the process, especially if you're under the gun. But
Do you ever feel like do you become unsure of yourself if you have somebody watching you like write? Do you? Or,
100%, 100%. It's not something that I've ever felt comfortable with, like
yeah,
quite honestly.
that's such a
I don't
private
like
thing,
people.
you know. Yeah,
Some people are fine with it,
yeah, sure, sure, yeah,
Lauren obviously is fine with it. I know other people. I know Steve Mazzaro doesn't mind having people in the room. I don't like it. I don't like it. I've never liked it. Um, but I was like, you know what? There's no other choice on this because we got to get it done fast,
yeah.
um, and he wants to be there, and so it ended up being great. It ended up being amazing. First of all, we just got along so well personally, but also he would just things that maybe I would abandon or would consider abandoning, he would hear something in quickly and sort of jump up from the couch, be like, "What's that?
Yeah.
What's that?" Oh, that's perfect. So the main problem became he would say, "Don't touch that. It's perfect," and I would be like, "I need to fix this." And so the week after he left, all like changing things, but um I'm also skipping ahead a little bit because I should bring up the earliest part of the process, which was he came to Hans's studio and told us the realities, and we sat in Hans's room for a couple days while we watched the
Yeah.
episodes. I should say the best part of that process was there was a lot of the translation that hadn't been done yet, like the
Mhm.
subtitles. So a lot of it, maybe the first couple episodes there was subtitles, but then the last couple there were none. So he was forced to, he really didn't want to do this, I don't think, but he was forced to basically act out the film to us as it was playing, and
Wow.
so he would, it would play, and he would be essentially translating, but he would be dramatically translating it. Like it wouldn't. He
Yeah.
wasn't just doing flat.
It was almost like a pitch. He was like pitching the scene.
It was like it was so compelling to have the filmmaker there because he was the writer and the filmmaker, and he
Right.
is an actor in the film. He's amazing in it. So it was like it somehow brought it to a new to a new level of it became so much more than a spotting session. It was really emotional, and having him kind of deliver these emotional scenes to you was really revealing, and I think kind of for all of us involved brought the project up to somehow a higher my goals became higher, at least
Yeah.
after having to perform it before you, because it wasn't, "Oh, guys, can you score this?" And like, it wasn't just craft somehow. It was like he
It
really,
was
you
like
could tell this,
passionate.
like,
Yeah, you see a passionate filmmaker and you just immediately wanted to jump on board with him, right? Yeah.
so much passion, and honestly, yeah, what it was one of the it was a crazy time because it was also I was doing The Last of Us at the same time,
Yeah.
and it was, but I'm so glad that I said yes to both because, he was just, I'm proud of what we did, and uh, I maybe more importantly than anything, I feel like I have this really, close artistic and personal relationship with a really amazing storyteller.
Yeah.
So I'm really really happy about this film. Or this series. I really do hope people get to see it because it deserves to be seen. It's fantastic, and um, yeah, hopefully they'll find a way to do international distribution.
Yeah, and the score is I love the kind of sonic palette that you and Hans cooked up, and it's unique. It feels unique to I mean you can feel Hans in it too, but it's you hear a lot of your voice as well, and it's just like this really, I mean, it's a perfect journey too. I mean, and you get it, and I know that the album is not the full experience, but the album does present it, and I think you guys did a good job putting it together as an album experience as well. So yeah.
Great. That's something I really enjoy, that putting together the album at the end, you know. Um and I'm vicious with deleting things and changing things, which I never used to understand, but now it's my it's my
So
favorite.
you're one of,
I
so
love
so the album experience is its own thing.
yes, 100%. And I'm merciless with with muting stems and remixing things, and I don't know. It's like it's your last goodbye with the music essentially,
Yeah,
and you know the thing about working in film music is that you when you hand stuff over to the dub, it really is you saying goodbye in some ways. I mean, sometimes you can go to the dub and have some input, um, but it's really out of your control at that point. So, and it becomes the filmmaker's, you know, music to do what they want with it, whether to cut it
right.
up or keep it or get rid of it. So, the album is a nice thing, at least for me psychologically, is just like, okay, this is you know, this is a nice way to sort of to have like a little quiet culmination of the work, and see what you like and see what you hate, and try to only keep the stuff that you like.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about this recently, how unique it is, at least in film in general, the fact that soundtracks are a thing. And I, you know, you're going all the way back to the first OST, which was, I think, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and it's like to take nothing else in the film exists, has a life outside of the movie itself or the series. You know, it's like I know there's like concept art books you can flip through and look at, you know, art from the movie or cinematography from a movie, but it's like to package something as something else, and people can experience it on its own separate from the movie, usually before or as when the movie's in theaters. I think it's to the power of why the music is so important. That's why I fell in love with filmmaking. It's like score and music is such an essential part of it, that it's like, no, look at it, has a life of its own, you know, separate from the movie. And I think that's just unique in its sense, like how soundtracks and scores are like that.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely am not someone who thinks um a score needs to live on its own as a soundtrack. I almost think of them as two separate things. It's like you have an
Yeah.
album, and almost the way I prefer to think of the album is like inspired by the score of the movie.
Mm.
Um, but I definitely still, it's not like I'm not on I'm not of the group that says that this is the true document of the score. I think the score really is the document,
Yeah.
and in terms of it being what the filmmakers wanted for their film. So I kind of try to separate, you know, what I think of the two, because I've had experiences going to the movie theater and having, you know, maybe especially early on, and seeing the work, you know, whatever work I did get hacked up,
Yeah.
or so quiet or loud at the wrong part, and it's just it's painful if you get too attached to what happens in the dub. So yeah, you have to separate a little bit, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we jump into talking about The Last of Us, I do want to mention South of Heaven, which I think is another wonderful score that you did.
Oh, thanks, man.
And the album is fantastic as well. Talk to me about working on that film and finding. I think that's such a unique film to find the tone for. And how did you approach? Yeah, how do you approach a score that finding the tone, finding that palette, and what was the kind of the goals musically for that score?
the 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 trick with the score was the tone of the film, because it swung wildly sometimes. It
Yeah.
was sort of um Aaron, this really talented Israeli director. He did this movie called Big Bad Wolves a few years ago, and he this was his first English speaking movie, and it was this really nice sort of neo Western noir. I've done a couple of these now, but
Yeah.
uh, you know, sort of crime story, but has elements of dark comedy, and so, you know, with that, um it was the goal was to kind of try to thread that needle. It was a romance. It was sort of, I guess what I felt it was aspiring to mostly was something like True Romance, whereas
Yeah.
this crime story, but a romance at the same time, and could be funny and could be sweet, but also could be really really violent. So for me, it was like it was threading that needle, and talking to him early on, it's about Jason Sudeikis plays a guy getting out of jail, and he, when he gets back to his wife, or his girlfriend, his fiance, that she has a cancer diagnosis. So as he gets out of jail, he basically um, is on borrowed time again, and so Aaron talked about how he wanted it always to feel like there was a ticking clock, and um, so it basically had these two sounds, which was the idea of it was that when he's with his girlfriend, Evangeline Lilly, that it should feel like an old record, and
Mm,
the idea was he wanted to try to stop time, and so I sort of based it on this piano loop that like literally feels like a record sort of stuck, the needle gets
right,
stuck,
right. Yeah.
because that was sort of the, what he wanted was to be able to stop time whenever he's with her, and just stay in this beautiful, that feeling of putting on your favorite album, and it's this old dusty record, and the cover's all worn out, and then at the same time he's sort of, as protagonists often do, he sort of is getting himself deeper and deeper into trouble with
Yeah.
criminals, and every time that happens, the sort of clock is ticking, and it's all mostly percussion, and the score becomes this percussive sort of mechanism that's taking him to his fate. So kind of that was the lofty idea there of trying to to thread that needle between those two types of stories. But it was super fun. It was so much fun working with him, and it came at a really interesting time, and um in the middle of the pandemic, and
Yeah.
a good one. Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's such a great score, and just like hearing your voice as a composer there, and just letting you watching you kind of like, yeah, it felt just like you nailed those tonal shifts like so well, and yeah, so congratulations on that. It's a really good, really beautiful
Thank you.
score. Um, so because I know, and it's unique because you're composing a lot on teams and co-composing, and another thing that you've also co-composed on, of course, is the Last of Us, which is the biggest
Yeah.
thing since sliced bread, for people like me who played the game when it came out and loved the game. It was so amazing to see such a well taken care of like a TV adaptation, having Neil Druckmann involved with Craig Mazin, and of course Gustavo returning to his iconic, I mean, score. I mean, that score has permeated through, so many, people just love that score so much. So to have him on board, and I know this is like a unique situation where you didn't work directly with Gustavo, and it's very similar to how the second game was done, where Matt Quayle kind of did a lot of the underscore and the gameplay music, where you came in to supplement those, kind of stitching the gaps between those really, heavy character moments with his themes that were, that he kind of rearranged um, for the show. So I'm curious what that was like for you to come in to and then approach it as a composer, where it's like you have someone's work kind of already there, and then you come in to kind of support where it's needed. So I'm curious for you, what was the process like on working on Last of Us?
Yeah. I mean, again, that was I sort of got a call very late, in I mean, late in two ways. Late to the production of this show, but also,
Yeah.
late in that this is like a long gestating story, and has such a history, especially with Neil and Gustavo.
Yeah.
So I'm first of all, I'm a fan of Gustavo's music. I never played the game, but I hadn't known the music for the game, and of course from his film work. Um, so the first step was kind of getting up to speed on the world as quick as possible. Um, but the overall focus for me, like you mentioned, maybe similar to Mac's assignment on the second game, was,
Yeah.
try to do these scenes that maybe Gustavo's tone doesn't completely cover. But especially important for me was to be really respectful of the musical identity that Gustavo had already shaped, because
Right.
it's loved by people, and it's beautiful. And I didn't want my stuff to sort of be this awkward part of an otherwise really graceful adaptation of
Yeah.
this video game. I think you're right. I think Neil and Craig were so smart about being respectful to the game and the spirit of the game, and then also kind of smart about what needed to change for this new medium. And I think a lot of what I was brought on to was to help translate to the new medium, especially with like a lot of the action bits,
Yeah.
because as you know, as a gamer, it's an active experience. You are in control of the timing of everything, and of course, you know, there is a general narrative drive, but not one that's sort of as controlled. So, you know, one of the conversations early on with Craig was about how he wanted the music to feel, especially in those action and tension scenes, because Gustavo's music does such a great job of playing the emotion and the pathos of the story. Um, but I think one thing that they were concerned about with the action scenes is they didn't want to move from video games, which is this very active experience where you
Yeah.
are in it, you are immersed, and then make it a TV show where all of a sudden you're watching these set pieces unfold, and you're kind of watching them passively as an observer. Craig was really specific about that. He wanted the music to feel internal. He didn't want necessarily the viewer humming a tune while Joel and Ellie are careening through the city trying to escape. He wanted it to really feel like you're in their bodies, or that you're inhabiting them, and to feel their panic. And so, you know, with Gustavo's stuff sort of handling those beautiful themes, it became sort of an exercise in restriction for me and my team, which was like, how do we tell this story, constricted melodically, but there's so much to explore in the sort of sonic landscape of of this world, and also sort of trying to make it a cousin of what Gustavo had done. I know, like,
Yeah.
for instance, like Gustavo's music is all very organic, and he uses obviously his guitars, but even everything he uses feels like from the real world. And I knew a lot of the stuff that we were going to have to do needed to be synthetic by its nature, but I really wanted it to feel as real as possible. So step one was break out this banjo that I haven't ever had an excuse to use, and start bowing the shit out of it, making nasty noises.
That's awesome.
Step two was call a bunch of my really talented friends, because I knew we needed so much sound work, and so many sort of sonic ideas. So I had a great team on that. It was Aldo Arachar, Forrest Christensen, and Chris Newland, and uh, it was just like a let's
Yeah.
gather all this ammunition, and if the assignment is atmosphere and momentum, and so let's make the most like authentic version of this world's that. And that's a terrible sentence, but you know what I mean. Like,
No, no, that
let's
absolutely.
let's
Yeah.
do that. Let's do that and make it feel like part of this post-apocalyptic world, and nasty, and not pristine, not 40 drummers in a hall, one drummer through a shitty amp, and uh, you know, bowed metal, and cracking wood, and it just became more about the sort of attitude of it. And the other thing that was super important to me was just like, okay, I feel like this is Gustavo's sandbox, and he's built this beautiful sandbox, and I'm being asked, I'm being told this is your corner right over here. I just
Right.
wanted to make something that didn't look wrong next to his, and helped sort of bring it into that new medium and hopefully elevate it a little bit, because the last thing you want is to go from a video game where you feel like this is it, and then go to like a lukewarm version once it becomes translated for a TV show. So um that was sort of the experience in a nutshell, and it really was just go 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 again.
What was the time
And
frame from getting hired to final? Like, how long were you
I
working
did
on this?
well, a couple months, but the tricky thing is the episodes would switch around.
Okay.
Certain episodes where I had quite a lot to do, and certain episodes where I didn't. And because of how the visual effects pipeline um, was working, sometimes you'd sort of be working on one episode, and there'd be like a really hectic one down the road that all of a sudden
Yeah.
they would be like, okay, we're doing that next week actually. So sometimes they would switch. It was a different TV schedule than I'd usually done, because it wasn't linear. They would go back and forth. Uh and I think I started on episode 2 and had to do that very quickly, that this sort of the museum sequence with the clickers and all of that. I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
was kind of that I think there was a bit of a fire drill for that, and then the first episode, and then
Yeah,
it
that
sort of,
pilot, man, that's a hell of a pilot. That
yeah, yeah.
that is a
It's a lot.
nonstop adrenaline ride, and that's what I think is so impressive. The fact that you not mentioned that is all out, kind of out of sequence, but the fact that you created so many, like the arcs and the builds that you did are just like, I mean, that one track Get Out is just like, I think, a masterclass in just like tension building and kind of,
Panic attack.
yeah, it's a panic attack. It very reminds me of, what Hans did at Dunkirk, something like that, where it's just like you're just like, oh, like when is it gonna break?
Yeah.
Shepard toning us all the way to like but and
Yeah, I think my version of it was a little more nasty and less mathematically considered, but
yes, but it
hopefully
got the job.
it gave you the same. Hopefully, it gave you the same anxiety.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And but so yeah, so was it difficult to see the big picture, or did you have kind of like an arc? I mean, you probably familiarize yourself with the world, but was it hard to create those arcs and make it feel, uh I guess, make that flow work and the pacing work throughout all 9 episodes, or was that kind of the spotting was already kind of in place for you, where it's like, okay, this is where we need it, so that those decisions were kind of already structured through the edit and everything?
So strangely, besides Craig and Neil, the other team I was dealing with a lot was PlayStation. Um,
Yeah,
there's some guys from the PlayStation team who kind of were there. I'm not sure at what point they got involved, but they were there to sort of as a helping hand to understand the story, but also to understand the musical heritage. And they just knew where all the bodies were buried. They know
yeah,
Gustavo's themes. They know you know they understand how the world should sound, so they were extremely helpful,
yeah,
especially for somebody sort of coming to this world fresh. In a way it kind of helped me, though, that I hadn't had that. I think it helped me that I wasn't hung up on the game experience, because I was experiencing this story, the Joel and Ellie story, as a TV show for the first time, so
yeah,
I could kind of feel shocked by it, as maybe quite a lot of the audience has been. I think it's been pretty good about sort of, I think, cultivating an audience on both sides of the fence, both people who had a history with it and
very
not.
much,
So
yeah,
in a way, I feel like I was able to experience it like hopefully that bit of the audience. Um, but yeah, in terms of an overall arc, I would say I tried to, especially because we were jumping around on in episodes, is I tried to not learn too much about where it was going, and treat each episode maybe as its own kind of
yeah, it's just like a
Last of
chapter.
Us. Yeah, because otherwise, then I would, if I got too hung up on the arc from episode 1 to the end, I would probably like say like, oh, can we go back and dub that episode again? I want to change this.
Right.
Um, but uh, it did help, I think, in that my assignment was a lot of set pieces, essentially, which
Yeah,
were
yeah.
so it's, you know, uh, it didn't necessarily have to tell the emotional arc of Joel and Ellie's story. So I think that helped in terms of splitting up and moving around on it on more than maybe Gustavo had to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, you guys did an amazing job. I mean, the series speaks for itself. I mean, people love it, and the fact that you mentioned, yeah, it's a PlayStation Studios, television production. It's Neil's part of it creatively, and it's which we haven't seen for for many years, for all of eternity. Honestly, for gamers, it's like this is the first like great adaptation. We've
Yeah.
always been like it's always been kind of the joke, like you can never make a good game adaptation, but you they did it, and your score, I think, yeah, your score supports Gustavo's stuff so much, and it supports the story, and the way it works in the edit is yeah, it's fantastic, man.
Well, hopefully that this, gives them a roadmap for adapting other video games in the future. I think it helped that this game, now I've been playing it since working on the show, and
Yeah,
it helps that it is so cinematic in its nature and that the story is so rich, but there's a lot of other really rich, video game stories out there to be told that kind of need respect because,
yeah.
A, you're going to lose your core audience if you shit on it, and
Right.
B, you might be missing some real deep quality in there that all you have to do is translate it and translate it respectfully, and
Yeah,
it's it's a quicker way to gain a new audience than to try to break something that you know didn't need to be broken.
yeah, and it's not like a dig at one medium over the other, because like my wife always loved watching me play it back when it, but she's not a gamer, so to sit for 12-15 hours is not feasible for some people to watch someone play a game like that, or just watch people play on YouTube or something. But she loved the series so much, and she is a huge fan of the whole series, even before the game, before it came out. So yeah, it's reaching a new audience that otherwise would not have experienced like such a powerful story. So I definitely agree with that. That's awesome. And yeah, you mentioned your amazing team too. Well, I mean, your buddy Forrest is actually on our third annual symposium panel that will be uh, it'll be up on the channel by the time this is on Film Music Media. So definitely go check it out. We talked a little bit about his work, on him working with you on Last of Us, but you also work with
Oh, great.
John Ashlew and Gretchen Bloom. I mean, talk about your team, because talk about the team aspect of this and how you tackle it, because you come up in such a to kind of bring it full circle, working at RCP, really focusing on teamwork. What was it like, and how did you rely on your team, to help you get this done?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, having come through sort of that teamwork atmosphere, it's really important to me, and something I really like about it. Some people maybe feel differently, but I really like when you're in the thick of it that you have sort of a small army of people who are all there for a common goal.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, this one, like I said, it was a lot, and I was sort of juggling things at the same time. And more importantly, it wasn't like the kind of thing where I could write a theme and other people could help develop that theme, because it couldn't be that. So it had to be a
Right.
lot of like coming up with sounds, and I needed people who were adept as sound designers and producers. And thank you for mentioning John. I forgot to mention him before, because
Yeah.
John and Chris Newland were two people I went to early on to say, um, "Hey, like I really need sounds. I really need sounds." And both of them, I'll just speak to Chris, because I've worked with him as a music editor for a really long time, but he's also a really talented sound designer,
Yeah.
and he really got. I mean, they both did, but Chris really understood what I was going for, because he helped me on South of Heaven as well, which in a lot of ways I was I was trying to build on a sound that I had sort of beta tested on South of Heaven, which
Oh
is like
wow.
it's a percussive sound that it needed to be big but sound from small things.
Hmm.
So I mean, it can't be little clicking
like
toys or anything, but it
pencil
needs
taps
to
or
be
anything like that. Yeah.
no, but it needs to be all found stuff. It can't be shiny in Hollywood. It needs to be
Yeah.
really gritty, and even if it's synth, it needs to sound like it's through an amp, or it's just it is passed through some analog gear at some point. So I think those guys really helped me early on to try to find sort of a library of sound. And then Forrest and Aldo were super essential in actually creating the music for this. Both of those guys are incredibly talented, both as composers and producers. And most importantly, what I needed was people who understood the sound that I was going for.
Yeah.
And when we were working on these cues together, it was like it was just always making sure that that I knew I had people who understood that it's not just about notes on a page, that it's like really about like creating a collage, creating these things are really hard to talk about sometimes.
I
I
know
find
it is
myself talking
because
about
yeah, it's like you're creating
yeah.
this tapestry, this pastiche of just like these elements, these textures, and then and of course you're kind of like at the top making this, curating it and then creating, the narrative of it. But it's like I always
The thing about it, oh, I'm sorry to
I don't know.
interrupt.
So I just always found it fascinating because, especially with synth scores and electronic scores, like yeah, you mentioned like creating the sounds, and it's like, when you're doing something acoustically, it's like what that instrument is. It exists in real space, but you can when you turn something digital, you can create so many. It's like the possibilities are infinite of what you can do with different programs and different analogs, synthesizers or anything like that, or just passing through all just creating layers and making sure things are rough around the edges and feel tactile, like almost like you can touch them and you can feel them.
And people who maybe don't understand that side of film music, the non-thematic side, don't understand. I think there's this idea that you just like press a button
Yeah,
and
just
sounds come out, but like
ominous
it can
drones
be
is
the
what.
most, yeah, creating sounds that feel right for it can be like some of the most time-consuming parts of things. Like on a
Yeah,
Hans project, we'll have people just who their whole thing is just creating sound. So it really, if you respect, again, it's about respect. I think if you respect the way it should be done, then that you need to spend time, and you need to have people that are willing to spend time to make sounds that are really authentic to the world and feel right. And uh look, I love and value a thematic score as much as anyone does, but you know there is there is there's a different sort of metric for a score like this, where you have to really put a lot of love and care into it, just as you would if you were writing a tune.
yeah,
um and not to um to go back to Hans, but something working with him on a project, especially something like Dune, you see that it is truly like an equal
yeah,
amount of care that goes into the production, as well as the thematic material. So yeah, I mean, just it was really, I will say, it was really nice, sort of, that at the same time as Xavier's thing, or in a similar time frame, at least there was a bit of an overlap,
right,
like having one who wanted it to be pure orchestral and thematic and emotional, and this other project to balance it out, which was like, let's give the audience this really intense experience, and just and the other element I should say is like, just make it badass. Like, that's the other thing,
yeah. Make
is
it
like
tense. Make it like
all the lofty bullshit aside, it's just like, how badass can this sound? I know that sounds silly, but it's like, as an audience member, that's kind of what you want to impact on
right.
a show like that as well. Just really intense and aggressive, and it's fun to wear both of those hats at the same time and be able to balance those two things, because they both mean a lot to me.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful conversation to have right now because I see a lot of uproar over Volker's win for All Quiet on the Western Front, and people.
Yeah.
I really stay away from the forums and the groups because all the traditionalists will usually shit on anything like that, and people are kind of in an uproar of like, how did this win? There's no melody, blah blah blah. And I was like, did you watch the film? Like, I mean, it's something like that.
I
It's just
haven't seen, I haven't seen the film, but just from like, hearing like a track and you know that there's a motif that is sure as hell as strong as it possibly
yeah,
can be.
absolutely, yeah,
So maybe it's not lyrical and symphonic, but I, just hearing it, I can imagine it's very effective.
yeah.
I'd like to see the
It
film.
this yeah this happens like every few. I mean, I remember when on Social Network one, people were blah, 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 but it's like it's like what?
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation about that score just recently. I mean, I personally, um, I'm not like I'm not a big believer in awards or award shows.
Yeah, I actually this is the first Oscars I actually watched in many years. I used to be one of those people that watched them every year, but I was like, why is this the barometer of like what things should be? Or it's fun to watch and it's fun to get recognition, especially because
yeah,
it's
yeah,
based on
yeah.
your peers.
No,
But yeah, it
I
should never be the driving factor
I've
for sure. Yeah,
I've certainly watched it. The horse race sort of part of it kind of turns me off, or just the idea that it does select the thing of the most quality. It's like quality.
yeah,
I don't understand the metric. Having said that, I yeah, I really think that was a particularly. I remember when that happened because I was new to remote, and that was a really strong year that year, where I know Hans was nominated. I think John Powell was nominated for
yeah.
one of
So How
the
to Train
How
Your
to Train Your
Dragon, was it
Dragon.
Inception? It was like I think it's 2010 that year. I forget. It's something like that. But
All I remember was it was a really, really strong crop, and any of them could be considered of high quality,
yeah,
including in my opinion, the Social Network, which I was having a conversation with someone around here the other day, and I was like, did that not define a lot of the sound of film scores of the decade after that? Did it not, you know, did it not sort of attached did it not deepen that film? I certainly felt like it did, and I certainly feel
yeah,
like it's aged well. I can still watch that movie and think it's really good, and just as Hans's did, just as John's is, those scores are amazing. It's just like they're that's the nice thing about what we do is that every story could be different and every story
yeah.
can allow you to have a different experience. Like, I mean, well, John, I'm a admirer of John Powell's work, and the stuff that he did for that Don't Worry Darling could not be
Oh,
more different than the How to Train Your Dragon stuff.
yeah,
And I I can't imagine having a problem with that. Uh, Either as an audience member, but especially as a composer, it's like, don't you want different experiences? Don't you want? I just did this western, so it's a little similar to South of Heaven, but it's a little more steeped in country western and recorded pedal steel in a traditional way for the first time. It was an instrument I never
yeah,
you know, considered much past like, you know, oh, this is, you have some pop music, you throw in some pedal steel and it becomes country. And it was like the most beautiful experience to be in the room with somebody who knew how to play it and just hearing the instrument in a different way. And I love those experiences of being thrown into an area of music that you're not comfortable in or that you haven't fully explored and kind of
yeah.
figuring your way out of it and figuring how it makes sense for the film. So yeah, I can't I think it's one of the things that makes this job really interesting. And honestly, as a consumer of film music, if that's what you do, I don't understand why that's not an interesting part of it either.
Exactly. I mean, it's about having a new experience. I mean, there's so much content made these days. It's like you can't move forward without trying new things. And I never subscribed to this idea that this is how a movie should be made. That's why I kind of like really rejected. Like I used to write reviews. I stopped doing reviews. I kind of rejected critic culture because it's like it's art, it's all subjective, and yeah, it's fun to discuss it and have a conversation. How did it made you feel? How do you, I mean, that's the human part of it. It's like you, I love going out after a movie with friends and just like, talking about it. But go online and be like, this is not how the score should be, or this is not how editing should be, or this is, it's like, what? No, that's the whole point. You're supposed to try new things. Like if we didn't have, the French New Wave, we wouldn't have jump cuts, we wouldn't have shot cut editing and stuff like that. You're just trying to break the rules to see what works and what doesn't. So, and some things work, and clearly when people, I guess, I don't know, people just have a problem with change, I guess. We're just creatures of habit, I guess.
I think that's true. I think that's true beyond people in this industry, or
Yeah,
this little niche. But yeah, I mean, it's nice that maybe people being upset is nice too. It shows that there's something being pushed, and
yeah.
some.
I mean, they're reacting with their emotions for sure. They're not.
We don't have to get rid of symphonic scores. We can still have them.
No,
We
yeah,
can
they're not good. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, before we wrap up, we've covered so many different topics and a lot of your work, but uh, you know, uh, I just want to, maybe just ask a general question just about life as a composer, because I mean, you're a working professional in this industry. Yeah, you still have to take care of all the personal things you got to deal with. You have an amazing family. You're a father, you're a husband. So I'm curious, how have you, I guess, as you've grown in your career, has it become more difficult to just balance, I guess, personal and professional life? How do you make it all work? How do you get through the day? And you have the same 24 hours we all do. So how do you get it all done?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's just as difficult as it was in my 20s, although I think when I was younger, it just was only my problem. So it was
Yeah,
less of a problem to worry about. I didn't have to think about trying to circle that square. Um, I have an amazing family, and my wife Monica, she works with me now
yeah.
as a
Monica's fantastic. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Um, so, and we have a 1.5-year-old son. So, honestly, I'll tell you, it's a work in progress. It's like I still work the way I've always worked, which is really hard, and at times sort of with blinders on. And I think you just have to be conscious about the other people that are in it with you, and there to help you. So whether that's my family or my team, uh, whoever's there, they're there to help you, and
yeah,
so you got to just make sure you're doing what's best for those people, and also for your own health. That's that's the other thing, is like or um I think when I was coming up in it, there was a lot more um sort of pride in killing yourself, and I think
yeah.
that's gone away. But I've always been a person who, like, does kill myself to get things done. I'm not like a, "Oh, yeah, I just work a 9 to 5 and shut off."
Right.
So honestly, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure out how to, um I don't you know, I don't know, the concept of work-life balance is a funny thing, and, I know some people just disregard the concept all in all. I think the best you can do is try to remember the things that are important. And obviously what I do is super important to me, but the people I love are the most important.
Yeah,
Um and just trying to keep that in mind, and do things in a responsible way. I mean, um I know that guy from Everything Everywhere All at Once, the editor, sort of spoke out about how things can work, and it'll be interesting. It's interesting to see the sea change happen, and
absolutely. Yeah,
I'm trying to evolve with it, as well as somebody who did disregard everything else when I was on a project, and and kill myself to get something done. So uh, it'll be interesting to see how this sort of continues and evolves from here,
yeah,
because it's an important conversation to be had, for sure.
yeah. And especially since everything is changing. I mean, not just the pandemic didn't just change everything, but also the industry is changing. I mean, the mergers, the changes, I mean, the way people are consuming things, the streaming bubble that popped, I mean, it's affecting everybody everywhere. And it also affects, that just bleeds into not only work and life balance, but like Yeah, it's definitely we're in the midst of it. A lot of stuff changing under our feet all the time.
Yeah, 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 and it's good. It's good that these conversations are being had, and I think the other important thing is to remember that how it happened for you is not how it needs to happen for everyone else. And it's
Exactly.
something I
Yeah,
try to remind myself of as well. And um yeah, I guess I'm just trying to listen to the conversation and yeah, we'll see where it goes.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Dave, thank you so much for chatting today. It was so great to catch up. I miss hanging there, drinking scotch with you. I need to stop by when I move back.
Yeah, well I'll make sure to re-up before you get here. But
Yeah,
yeah,
get
yeah, it'd
you're
be
looking a little low in the back. I don't see any bottles, but give me some
well,
Isla
that's
scotches
because
and I'll come over.
I'm at a good part of the project, everything's
Yeah,
everything's happy. But
it's just healthy juices
uh
and smoothies.
exactly. I'm a dad. It's all smoothies.
It's all smoothies. Yeah,
That's
it's all gravy.
there's no whiskey ever anymore. Yeah. But it'd be great to have you back in town, man, and always good talking to you.